Welcome to Straight Out of Savannah, where the magic happens. Today, my guest Brian D. Smith is here, and I am so excited. He is a certified grief educator, life coach, author, and host of the popular Grief to Growth podcast. After the sudden passing of his 15-year-old daughter, Shayna, in 2015, Brian embarked on a journey of spiritual exploration and service. Blending lived experience with thousands of hours of research, Brian helps others navigate grief, discover meaning, and transform pain into purpose. You can connect with him on Substack, Grief to Growth, or at grieftogrowth.com. And all of his details will be in the show notes. So, Brian, your journey into spiritual exploration began after the loss of your daughter, Shayna. How did grief become a catalyst for reclaiming your own spiritual authority in midlife?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for having me, Tammi. I'm really excited to be here today. It's funny, that's like the midpoint of my journey when Shayna passed. I actually had an extreme fear of death growing up to the point where I would call it thanatophobia. I would have panic attacks. In my mid-30s, I started seeing a counselor. It had gotten that bad. So I studied the afterlife for about 20 years before Shayna passed, from my mid-20s to like my mid-50s. I was 54 when she passed away. But that's like the pivotal point for me, because that's when all the stuff I learned over the previous 20 years, now I had to apply it. I had to say, okay, I understand this maybe in my head, but how do I apply this to my heart? And that honestly took me 4 or 5 years before I really made that translation from that head knowledge to understanding what death really is and what death really isn't. So when Shayna passed, I thought, okay, this is not the end of Shayna. I had enough knowledge to know that she still existed in some form somewhere, probably in heaven. What I didn't understand was I could still have a relationship with her now. And that was the real transformation for me, that I've been on that journey now for, it'll be 11 years in a couple of weeks.
So as you did that, how did it change you?
It changed me. The fear of death, which I think we all have to some extent. People haven't really leaned into it. Most of us put it off. Most of us, it's not something that we think about. We don't speak out loud. And when people do talk about it, we call it morbid. Don't talk about it, that's morbid. Don't talk about dying, but it's the one thing that is 100% universally guaranteed. They say it's death and taxes. Taxes aren't really guaranteed. Death is for all of us. So I started thinking, why is it we fear the one thing that's universal? And what good does that do us? Because it doesn't prevent it from happening. So the way that it changed me is that, believe it or not, and this is what's really weird, I lost my fear of death. I don't have a fear of death at all anymore. And I don't see death as the enemy. I don't see it as something to be avoided. It can't be avoided. It's not something I'm rushing toward, but it's something that I don't dread. And we were talking earlier before we start recording also, we talked about people that pass young. So we like to think, oh, I'm going to live to 70 or 80 or 90, but some of us only get to be 15. Some of us only get to be 50 or 60. So it really makes life more precious. It makes every day, for me, I'm like, this could literally be my last day.
Yeah.
And if today is my last day, how do I want to live my life? I want to live my life with no regrets. So I started doing gratitude practice. I started doing basically a little mini life review pretty much every day. What did I do today that I could have done better? So the thing about death is it makes life more meaningful, more precious. When you're young and you think you've got dozens of years, you tend to waste a lot of time. I had my 65th birthday a week ago today.
Hey.
Thank you. So when you start hitting these milestones, you realize, hey, I don't have forever. So you start living differently. What if we could start doing that when we're young? What if we could start doing that? Whatever age you are, you can start doing that right now. Yes. And that's what it did for me.
That is powerful, because that leads me into that midlife reinvention, because we can have anything that we desire, right?
Yeah.
So when I consider that and I think about your work, you've talked about turning pain into purpose. What does that look like for someone who's been reshaped by profound loss? So by like a death of a partner or a child, or even a pet.
Yeah, or a pet. Absolutely.
Yes.
So one thing I want to make really clear here, when I'm talking from 11 years out, I'm talking from a long time out perspective. So for anybody that's in early grief or in fresh grief that's saying there's no way that this is going to ever turn into any kind of purpose, I hear you. I understand that. I said the exact same thing. I was angry. I was bitter. I took a vow that I would never be happy again. I would never be joyous again. I've said to myself, people are going to say that Brian was never the same. That's how much he loved his daughter. And I thought that was a way of honoring her. So I understand when people say that, and I don't want to not honor that feeling that people have. But for me, I joined an organization called Helping Parents Heal. And what I did, I saw people who were 8, 9, 10 years from losing their children. And I saw them living happy, joyous, productive lives. And I was like, okay, if they could do that, how did they do that? Was this possible? So it's a process, discovery. I used a lot of agricultural analogies in my work, metaphors. And one of my tagline is plant it, not bury it. And what I mean by that is when we bury something, we put it in the ground and it doesn't come back. We bury a body, it's there, it's gone. When we plant a seed, we expect a yield, we expect a return, we expect growth. So when you go through a grief process, you feel like you've been buried because it's the same motion. It's putting something underground. But what eventually happens is you realize I've been planted. As the time goes by, as you receive truth, which is say sunshine, as you receive love, which is like water, as you receive these things, you start to blossom. And I've seen this now hundreds, thousands of times talking to people, seeing people that happens, right? Now, it is a choice. We can choose to remain bitter, but we can also choose to say, let me just be curious about this and what are possibilities that could come from this?
So when you work with people, that is something that you get them to see is the possibilities.
It's a slow reframing of the event. Everything in life is really more about perspective than what actually happens. We can choose to see something as positive, we can choose to see something as negative. And frankly, everything is a mixed bag. Everything has some good and some bad. Now, there are things in life we would say there's nothing good about this. Just an example, to not go all the way to the point of death, but illness. I was talking with a young woman the other day who had gotten a cancer diagnosis when she was in her 20s. And she had been estranged from her parents from the time she was very young. So when she got the cancer diagnosis, it allowed her to slow down. She was going at an incredible pace. It brought her parents back into her life. So she reconciled with her father, who she had been estranged from. So she said, cancer was really not a bad thing for me. Now, we would look at that from the outside and say, cancer is always a bad thing, but it's not always all negative. I have a really good friend who has a child who was born with a severe disability. He was only supposed to live to the age of 2. He actually ended up living until like he was 11 or 12, but he was never able to speak. He was never able to walk.
Oh, wow.
But he was the best thing that ever happened to my family. So again, we take these circumstances and we say, this is bad, but we never know how it's going to really turn out.
So you can definitely reframe that.
Yes.
I get that because I had COVID and that thing, well, it's been a little treacherous, but I realized that it was a gift because just like you were talking about the young lady with the cancer, it slowed me down. Like it one of those things where I couldn't. The brain fog was horrendous in the beginning.
Yeah.
Gotten better over the years, it's been 4 years, but I'm still experiencing a lot of things, the fallout from that.
Yeah.
I recognize it as grace and I call it the gift that keeps fun.
Yeah.
But I had to recognize that and realize that for me, it was something to help me to get on this path even deeper. Already on it, but even deeper. I've been doing a lot of energy work because there's really nothing that they can do medically. You go to the doctor and they look at you like something like you're mental.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know because your labs are good and this and that. Not talking about how I have this cough that I've had for all these years. My stomach has been bothering me for all these years. When you go and get all the stuff done, and they say stuff like, oh, your stomach is beautiful. Go get the EGD. I said, can you tell it to stop hurting?
Yeah, exactly.
It caused me to make a lot of shifts in my life. Some of them I saw in a different way, but once I shifted my perspective on it, and once I began to see the gift and the blessing even in it, And so I could see how something like that's devastating could be a gift.
It's interesting because part of helping parents heal, there was a couple of women in our group to put together what they call silver linings list of things after their children had passed. And people would come into the organization and see this and say, silver linings, this is crap. This is not real. There's no silver lining. The fact that there's a silver lining doesn't mean there's not a cloud. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck. It doesn't mean that we don't go through pain. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. But everything that we get comes along with certain gifts along with it, right? It's a mixed bag. So we've been given this thing. We can choose how we perceive it. We can choose what we do with it. I happen to believe that everything in life happens for a reason, which I did not believe before my daughter passed away. I
Oh,
do believe that now. But for people that even don't believe that, because I would say, you don't have to believe anything when you listen to me. Don't even take my word for it. Let's just say that you don't believe that. You can choose to make purpose out of what happened to you. You can choose to live for your loved one's legacy. You can choose to set up a scholarship fund in their name. You can choose to donate to medical research in their name. You can choose to do those things. You can choose to say, I've been in this job I've hated for 20 years. And I realize now life is short. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do something that I really want to do. That's a choice.
that was
So,
me.
yeah, you can choose to make purpose out of it. So that's just a fact. So what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, I have a friend, her daughter passed away. She had already had a baby and was married and stuff. I want to say she might have been 30. I think she said forever 30. Yeah, because she's the same age as my son. And she passed away, unalived herself. And ooh, that thing was hard. So what
Yeah.
she did was she created a scholarship fund for people that had mental issues because the girl had struggled times and all that kind of.
Yeah.
She had a life because the last thing I saw of her on Facebook, she had gone to Egypt or somewhere, on camels and had went and climbed Mount, it's one of those mountains. So she had a life. She had been, I think, a Miami Dolphins cheerleader or something like that.
Well,
So she had a lot of light in that 30 years, but yeah, but my friend, she did that and she has some benches that they got for her that talk about mental illness and called 988 and all this other kind of stuff. She's turned that and I'm really proud of her because I just really can't imagine how devastating that could be. When, and then it was one of the children, the one that she had the most problems with growing up, the one that would run away from home and all this. And it was wild, and that's the one. But I think that when you can do something like that, I think it helps you even in the grieving process.
so that was, and again, if someone had told me this 8 or 9 years ago, I would have smacked them in the face. It's something that I've seen over and over again. People take that pain and turn it into purpose. And I tell people when you're going through grief, I'm like, why would you waste the pain? You're going to have the pain anyway. So why don't you take that pain and do something with it? And people often ask me, when am I going to go back to being the person I was before? And the bad news is you're never going to go back to being the person you were before. But the good news, you're going to be an even better, stronger person for having gone through this. I was just talking with a client just yesterday, and she lost her longtime boyfriend, partner, 2 or 3 months ago. And she's, I don't want this. And I'm like, of course you don't want it. This doesn't mean you're going to want it. It doesn't mean you're going to say, oh, yeah, great. This is great. I said, you're not going to want this. You're never going to want this. But you're eventually going to accept it. You're going to learn to live with it, and you're going to learn to move forward with it. You're not going to move past it. You're going to move forward with it. You're going to integrate it. It's going to become part of who you are.
I love that because I think that I have a question. When do you recommend that people reach out to someone like yourself or even groups?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I was studying grief and grief group support, grief counselors, grief therapists, etc., it's really interesting because it doesn't always help. In fact, it can actually hurt if you don't need it. So for most people, if you lose your 95-year-old grandmother and she's slipped away during the night, for most people, we can integrate that grief pretty easily. We can move forward because it's expected. It's when grief gets complicated. It's when there's trauma attached to it or something's really out of order, like someone losing a child or someone losing a spouse when they're young. And I was telling you earlier, I've been working with a lot of spouses lately. I think that's always traumatic. I don't care what age it happens at. There's something about that just kind of rips people in half. So for me, it's when people feel Now it's interesting because people come to me and this is what's really common. They'll say, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm not moving forward. Now, I will say most of them are not stuck. They're just too hard on themselves. They want to accelerate the process. They want to be like, I want to be done with it now. So it's whenever people feel like, I just like to have someone to talk to, someone to listen to me, someone to understand what I'm going through. That's a lot of what I do, frankly, is listening to people, validating their experience, telling them that this is normal. I was talking with someone I've met for the first time yesterday, and she had a whole list of things. Is this normal? Where should I be now? It's been 2 years since my husband passed. I still haven't gotten rid of all of his stuff. My friends tell me that's not normal. And I'm like, yes, everything you're doing is normal. Here's some things we can do that might help you through the process. But what you're going through is normal. So we can all, I think, use some help in some ways. Now, I will also say, and this because I'm never out here to drum up business, if you have family or friends that you can lean on, that's great.
Yeah.
But sometimes people don't feel like they can be really authentic with their friends and maybe have feelings that they don't feel like I can share this safely. The other thing is people say, I don't want to be a burden. Every time they're around, all I'm talking about is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I'm like, when people pay me, that's what I'm here for. So that hour you have with me is your time to just say whatever you want. So a lot of people find that really helpful. They're like, I just can't share this with my spouse or my kids. I don't want to burden them with it, or they don't understand.
Because you, especially if it's been a while,
Yeah.
it's been a year, 6 months, a year, and that's all you talk about. And that's how you get the feeling. I could see that.
Yeah.
I'm just dumping on people and this and that. And yeah.
That's a really good point. Because the woman I talked to yesterday, it had been 2 years, and she goes, my friends are, you should be moving forward. You should be moving on. And I'm like, you lost your spouse, this person you've been with for 15 plus years. It was the center of your life. 2 years, I don't say this, there aren't stages in grief, but I tell people 2 years I consider to be extremely early grief. When they touch to be over it in 6 months, no. A year, no. 2 years, just starting to adjust.
I agree. I've seen some things where people have lost spouses and 3 months later they were married again. And I'm like, you didn't take time to heal, did you?
Yeah, I would be concerned about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in your work, you help people navigate meaning after devastation. So how can grief become a doorway to a deeper spiritual leadership rather than a collapse of faith?
Yes. So the thing about faith, I was raised in a Christian background, and a lot of times when we use the word faith, we think of Christianity, and
Yeah.
we think about a particular set of beliefs in the Bible, belief in a church.
Yes.
I'm really at the point now. I don't like to use the word belief because I'm a scientist by background. I'm a chemical engineer, and I'm like, I have been convinced by the evidence. So when I talk to people, I'm like, I'm not trying to get you to believe anything. I will present to you evidence as to what it is the conclusions that I've come to. The one thing I will say I have faith in now, though, is I have faith that there is a higher intelligence that orders everything. And I have faith that everything will work out for the best, even when it doesn't seem like it in the moment. So that's the only faith I would say that I have now. And that's based even upon what near-death experiencers tell us when they've been to the other side and come back. That's based upon what a lot of religions tell us, a lot of faith traditions tell us. So even that's not just true, just believe this. I've seen people's faith destroyed because their faith is in something that's false. Their faith is in what I call the Santa Claus God, the God that says, that you say, if you do good things, I'll give you good things. If you're naughty, though, you're going to get a lump of coal. So people, they'll lose someone, they'll say, what did I do wrong? Or I got sick, and the church will even tell them, it's because of your lack of faith. You must have sinned. And Jesus himself contradicted that. Jesus himself shot that down. So that kind of faith does fall apart when something bad happens because God never promised us that we would have an easy life. If you believe that Jesus was God's son, Jesus did not have an easy life. He was murdered. So if Jesus had to go through that, what makes us think we're going to skate through life? So the faith comes in that says it's all going to be okay. And even though I can't see the higher good in this, I trust that there is some higher good in it. And one of my favorite quotes is by John Lennon. He says, everything will be okay in the end. Everything is not okay. It's not the end. So I'm always like, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. And it will. And even even a terminal diagnosis. I had a friend that passed from ALS, one of the most diseases there is.
I've seen it. Ugh, it's horrible.
And I watched that woman transform into a joyous person, a humorous person. She wrote a book with her eyes because she couldn't use her mouth or her fingers. So she had this device that she used her eyes to type out her book. I interviewed her for my podcast using technology because, again, she couldn't speak. And I saw her touch so many people, and her book still lives on. And I know that she's healed now. So even that is going to turn out okay in the end.
Yeah. That's powerful because that actually is one of my favorite quotes as well.
Yeah.
I think like that, and I've always. And then when I came, like you, I was raised Christian. My grandmother was a pastor. Yeah, so I know that book. But I have evolved.
My grandfather was a pastor, and it was a church that I grew up in, my father's father. And so I grew up with the whole fire and brimstone and all that stuff. And I would say that I've evolved, I've learned. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the Bible, but one of my ancestors is Thomas Jefferson. He said to separate the diamonds from the dung. So Thomas Jefferson, there's something called the Jefferson Bible. He went and he took a razor and he cut out the parts that he didn't think belonged in there. So there's good stuff in the Bible, but there's also frankly, there's a lot of crap in the Bible. I know that's not offensive people, but there just is.
The thing, I don't believe that you should blindly believe anything. I feel like when I said this before, I said, I believe that. And I didn't realize at the time, of course, but I think I was unbelieving because we went to church sometimes every day. These guys growing up. And so they spoon fed us the Bible. So we had that. But it's like when things happen, I just didn't really believe that God was going to do what I felt like he should do. Didn't believe it. And I didn't realize it. Even going to church as an adult. Stopped going to church at 17 because I said, well, if God wants to know where I was on any particular day, he can pull a file and see that I was in that church. So I stopped. But then when I had kids, I was like, I think I'm supposed to raise these kids in the church because this is what we know. So I did. We went and found this mega church and all that. And so one day I was just sitting and I wasn't doing anything. I was just listening to some music. I love jazz and I like classical and different things. So I was just sitting listening to some music and all of a sudden I heard, you don't really believe. And I was like, and then when I sat down and I started looking for the evidence, it was the truth.
For me, it never made sense to me that we were born because Adam sinned, that you were literally born in sin. You were literally born opposed to God. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll buy that we've all sinned, but you're saying I'm born in this state because what, genetics? How does this work? And so that never made sense to me. And then this idea of eternal hell never made sense. No. There were a couple of events that happened in my life. The first one was when my uncle passed away and people said he was in hell because he was gay. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Then when my first daughter was born, I looked at her and I was like, okay, no, I'm done with this. There is no way that if God loves me more than I love my daughter, which he supposedly does, he's definitely good.
Yeah.
There's no way that he could eternally torment me. He could torment me for a moment, let alone for an eternity. And that's when I said, why do you believe this? And if you ask someone, if someone told you this, but it wasn't in the Bible, you would say they're insane. You would say that's literally, you're insane.
Yeah.
But we believe it because we were taught that before we were old enough to really understand it. So it makes no sense. And then I could go on and on, but I don't. The fact is that I think there is a lot of good stuff in the Bible. I still am a follower of Jesus. I have a Jesus statue back over my shoulder there. I think Jesus is a master, an avatar, a great teacher, a big brother, a leader for all of us to follow. I'm sorry?
I said, and my healing guide.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I've studied. I've studied near-death experiences. We were talking earlier. You said you like to watch them.
Yeah.
And the amount of time Jesus shows up in near-death experiences, I'm like, there is something going on here, whether you're a Christian or not. There's something going on. Atheists see him.
Yes.
Buddhists see him.
Yeah.
So there's something going on here. So I'm not bashing Jesus at all, not even a little bit. But what people have done with the Bible, there's a great book, The Gospel of Thomas, that was left out of the canon because it's too much. The church leaders said, we can't put this in there. These people will rebel.
Yes. We won't be able to keep them slaves. Yeah, it's something because I bought an Ethiopian Bible and I have it, a Bible over there. And then I bought the Apocrypha. So that, because I want to know the real deal. King James, I thought about that. I'm like, why would we even read anything that he wrote?
but that guy was crazy.
Do it for you. You're like, no. People are like, oh, I love the King James. No.
Yeah.
Oh, look at something else. I had somebody laugh and I said, I have about 5 or 6 Bibles in here. I said, because I have Message, which I really like. And then I have one of my old Bibles from church. It was a King James and Amplified on one side. James one side, Amplified on the other side. Don't have that one. But I was like, I was like, I read all kinds of different things about the Kabbalah recently because I wanted, and I know that these are all things that can help us, especially on this grief journey.
And why would God come to just one group of people in the desert 2,000 years ago and then stop speaking to everybody else? But that's what we were taught, right? So yes, I've studied Kabbalah a little bit. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching. I've looked a little bit of the Book of Mormon, just a little bit, the Quran. And there's a lot of truth in all those things because God comes to all people. When I was part of the, United Church of Christ, they would say, don't put a period where God has put a comma. So the idea is God doesn't stop speaking. God still speaks. So he still, to people, through people. If there were prophets 2,000 years ago, why wouldn't there be prophets today?
So when I first got on YouTube, I used to do a lot of readings and things like that. People would come in my comments and say, you need Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, apparently you don't have Jesus. And you wouldn't be saying these things to me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it would really irritate me at first. Now I've evolved, so I don't care. And I actually go back with them sometimes, just have fun. I said, because in the church, they call me a prophetess. I said, but because I'm over here, you're calling me a witch or worse?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was attending one of those big mega churches, evangelical churches, and we were having this thing where we're bringing new people in and we're teaching them about the church and stuff. And they said, let's all get together and we're going to write your neighbor's name on a piece of paper, a neighbor that you want to bring to Jesus in the next year. And we're going to write it on a piece of paper, then we're going to get in a circle, we're going to pray over it, and then we're going to burn the paper to send it to heaven or something. And I said,
they're doing a ritual.
I said, if a pagan did this, you would call them a witch, and you're casting spells on people.
Certainly.
But I'm like, you don't even see the hypocrisy.
They don't see it. I said, I think that church hate is the worst.
Yeah.
Because when those church people come at you, oh, good.
Yeah. So back to the subject we were talking about, I'm a seeker of truth, period.
Yes.
Truth to the capital T, wherever it happens to come from. And I'll never forget talking to a friend of mine. He's a former pastor. He was my financial advisor. We were out walking one day and he said, we were talking about certain things. I was talking about the books I read. He goes, Brian, I don't read books about the Bible or about spirituality. I only read the Bible. And I'm like, okay, but I said, I've been reading about near-death experiences. I said, I believe Paul had a near-death experience, at least one, if not two. And I said, if you believe that Paul had a near-death experience, if you believe the story about the road to Damascus, him being struck blind, all that stuff, if you believe that, why wouldn't you believe Mary, who had a near-death experience yesterday and said she saw Jesus and heard his voice? Why would you believe him, not her? And it's because it's in this Bible that was written 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. 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 It's mind-boggling when you just speak truth and you make sense.
Yeah.
When it's almost like people just can't handle truth.
Yeah. But the thing is, the grief is what cracks us open a lot of times.
Yes. Yeah.
The grief is what says, because everything's going along in human beings, as long as things are going well, we're going to keep doing the same things. That's just natural. That's biology. It says it's the most efficient thing to do. The grief is when people say, this is not working. This just believing this Bible is not working. Just praying the rosary is not working. I need something more. I need something deeper.
Yeah.
So what happens is we go through this dark night of the soul,
Yeah.
which is where we lose our faith, we think.
Yeah.
We're struggling. Then that opens us up and allows, as some people say, it's where the cracks are, is where the light can come in.
Yeah.
So that opens us up to saying, I want to know the truth. I want to receive whatever you have it is for me to receive. And when you do, that's when the truth comes to you.
That is. All right. So we're going to land this plane. I have one question that I ask every one of my guests, and I've only gotten the same answer maybe 3 or 4 times out of maybe 300 or 400 interviews. But the question is, if there was anything in the world that you could change, what would that be and why?
If there's anything in the world that I could change, it would be for people to know who they are, who you are, where you came from, why you're here, and where you're going. Those 4 questions. because I believe that our world right now is lost because we don't know. We don't know that we are spirit beings having a human experience. We don't know that we're all the same. We don't know that when we attack our brother, we're attacking ourselves. If we could just have that one realization. Now, of course, I think we come here to forget that so we can remember it. That's part of the game that we play with ourselves.
Yes.
But that would transform the world.
That is powerful, and I totally, completely agree. But so let the people know if you have any last thoughts, if you have anything that's going on, any programs or anything that you want to share, and where is the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I always have stuff going on. The best place to connect with me is on Substack. So it's grief, the number two, grief numeral two, growth.substack.com, or you can go to my website, grief2growth.com/Substack. You can find me that way. I write at least an article a week on Substack. I have a Grief to Growth podcast. You can always find me there, and you can keep up with where I'm speaking. I've got a radio program coming out in a couple of weeks that hasn't been announced yet, but by the time people see this, I'll have that announced on my Substack as well.
That's awesome. Brian, it was my pleasure. And I am just so grateful that you came. I starstruck a little bit because I read your stuff on Substack. And I was like, oh. And so when I reached out, I said, I hope he comes. And then when I saw you stand up, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
We would have this discussion.
I appreciate you inviting me. One last thing I always say, I love this quote by Ram Dass, we're all just walking each other home. So whatever any of us can do for each other, I'm here to do that. So I appreciate you having me and allowing me to share this time with you and your audience.
Yes, this has been incredible. So if you are watching or listening, thank you for watching and listening, and make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and download wherever you are watching this or listening. Again, we have had the most amazing time. Brian, it's been such a pleasure, and I'm just so grateful for this time.
Me too. Thanks.